Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click on that like button if you like my video. Also click on that notification bell. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Linux Technical Interview Questions course. This course is designed for people who are this close in getting a job in IT, and more specifically in Linux capacity. If you have all it takes to get the job and your resume is updated, you look at the job description and you know that you are the qualified person for this job, but somehow you're going for an interview and you are being rejected. Well, there must be some reasons, and that's where I am here. I'm going to teach you how you should handle your Linux technical interview questions. My name is Imran Afzal, and I've been in IT for more than 20 years. I have almost 80 to 90,000 students worldwide, and I have helped so many students land the job of their dream. So, if you want to get a job in Linux, this course will help you significantly. I have collaborated with another online instructor named Kashif Ali, who will cover the second part of this course. The first part will be covered by me, where I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to teach you how you have to conduct your interview. What are the technical questions they will ask you, behavioral questions, situational questions, or their favorite question, which is tell me about yourself. I will cover everything. Whereas the second part, which is a technical part, the second instructor is going to teach you on the console how the question is asked and how the question should be answered. So what are you waiting for? Let's go get that job. Hello again, and now the next step is understanding the job requirement. Where are you going to find the job requirement? Of course, that job requirement is in the job description the recruiter has sent you. So go back to his or her email, go through it, and read every line that is listed under the job description or the requirement. I want you to really read every line and understand what they are looking for. Let's say if they are looking for someone who is really great at documentation, so make sure you are prepared to answer any question or tell them your experience about documentation. If they are looking for someone who wants to do or perform an upgrade on the Linux system environment, if they want to upgrade from 6 to 7, 7 to 8, whatever that is, and if it's listed there, make sure you understand that requirement and you go back to your old days where you actually performed that upgrade and what are the things that you did. If they are looking for someone who could provide support 24 hours, 7 days a week and be available on all call rotation, most likely it's written there. So again, understand and go back to the days when you provided or you have been provided support with your existing job for 24 hours, 7 days. And make sure you tell the hiring manager that I did notice, by the way, I did notice on the paper that it says that you are looking for someone who could provide 24 hours, 7 days support and who could be on call rotation. And you could tell the hiring manager, hey, I've been on call and I've been providing support 365 days. Trust me, he's going to be or she's going to be very impressed that you have taken the time and read through the job requirement. It's not that you just came in and you just wanted to get a job without knowing what the job is for. So please go through the job description one more time or twice before the call and understand every single job bullet points that they are looking for. Hello everyone and welcome back. Now your interview has been confirmed. You might be going on site or you're going to have a phone interview. Well, doesn't matter what it is. Now what's the next step? The next step is for you to prepare and research the company. The company that you're going to have an interview with. So for example, if the company is Google, perfect. You don't have to do the research, right? Everybody knows Google or Microsoft. But sometimes you might have to find some more information about the group or department that you're going to be working with. So if you have never heard of that company that you're going to have an interview with, I would highly recommend that you go ahead and please do the research. Nowadays, it's so easy that you could go online, look at the website, and find out the company's mission statement or company's, there is a tab always when you go to a company website, it tells you about. Click on about and you will find out what exactly the company does. If you cannot find any information, for example, which is highly unlikely, go pick up a phone and call the recruiter and ask the recruiter some more information about the company. So in this tip, I definitely wanted to tell you is please make sure you do the research about the company before you have a call with the hiring manager. Hello again. Now let's go over the interview or the technical interview format. When you are on the phone or you are actually on site with a hiring manager, the first thing that person will do is to go over the company. Hey, this company is this, it has that many employees and it has grew for that many years. They'll also go over the department or group they're working for. Hey, this is for the infrastructure department or group or storage or whatever the team they're working for. Then the next thing is about the job description. They'll tell you what they are looking for. So at this time, you should write down exactly what they're looking for or what that person is going through, all those job requirements. Then also, some of the good hiring manager, what they do is they also give you a quick overview of how they are going to conduct the interview. They tell you, hey, first I'm going to tell you about what we are looking for, and then we're going to ask you some questions, and at the end of the interview, we'll give you a few minutes to ask us some questions that you have. So this is the format they will lay out for you. Once they do that, then the very first question that every hiring manager will love to ask is, tell me about yourself. Now, tell me about yourself question is something that you have to really embrace, right? Really have to stand out with. That is something I will cover in the later lecture. But for now, I want you to focus on how the interview format will look like. After that, they will ask you technical questions. They will also ask you some behavioral questions, some situational or scenario-based questions, and that's, once again, I'll cover in the later lecture. Then once all the questions are answered, maybe they are very, very technical questions, along the way they'll ask you, maybe they'll give you a piece of paper, sometimes they do, and they ask you to answer them on the piece of paper. But again, it all depends how or which company that you're going to work for. Once all those questions are answered, of course, make sure every answer that you are giving them is actually precise and you should provide the answer to the question they are asking. So don't drift. So once everything is done, then the last part they'll say, so do you have any questions for us? So, of course, at this time, you should have a couple of questions for them, which, again, I'll cover later on. Once that is done, then I want you to tell them something that what they're looking for and why you are a good fit for this job. So that's what I wanted to cover in this interview format. Again, to summarize, is that they're going to give you company information, job description, they'll give you the interview layout, then they'll get into asking about yourself, some technical questions, situational questions, and at the end, they will ask you if you have any questions for them. All right, stay tuned. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now, the next tip that I want to give you is about this. Your resume. If you have a one-page resume, two-page does not really matter. All I want you to do is before your technical interview, I want you to go through your resume line by line as to what you have written on your resume. You're probably thinking, hey Imran, this is my resume. I have written it, so I know it all. How can I forget? People do forget. That is perfectly fine. If I have done something maybe 10 years ago, I probably have forgotten already. So if I go through 10 years from now what I did, and it is written on my resume, it is a great exercise that you read through them, find out what you did, and bring it back to your memory. Refresh it with your memory. Now, the reason I'm asking you to do that is because 8 out of 10 hiring managers, or I would say great hiring managers, would actually pick up your resume, and while conducting an interview with you, they will ask you questions from your resume. So every line that you have written in your resume, make sure you could support that line. If your resume says that you have performed installation and configuration and supporting of Linux environment, make sure what version that you have supported, how many servers you have supported, how many virtual machines there were, how many physical machines there were, how many data centers that you work with, everything you need to know and remember. If they ask you something about, hey, I noticed that you work on, for example, another technology, for example, VMware. Tell me what version of VMware you work with. So if you have not written, they will ask you. So remember, bring it back to your memory and remember what version that you work with. If you cannot support any line, and let's say you just wrote it down but you don't remember, take it out. Take it out before you bring or give this resume to the hiring manager. So let me summarize this. Before you go and meet the hiring manager or have an interview on the phone with the hiring manager, please go through your resume. Every line that you have written, you should be able to answer and support and back up with proof with everything that you have done. And again, every hiring manager would love to ask you questions from the resume. So this tip is about knowing your resume. Please do make sure you do follow up everything that I just said. Hey everyone, the very first process in the technical interview is the headhunter or the recruiter, or in some cases the HR representative is the one who is going to schedule a time with you. This person is going to give you a call or send you an email, and he's going to say, hey, I got great news for you, Imran. The hiring manager really likes your resume. And he or she wants to set up an interview for half an hour or maybe an hour. And then you could come on site or you could have a phone interview. It depends on the requirement for the company. Then this recruiter will ask you a couple of times where you are available to do the interview. So make sure you provide 2 or 3 different windows for at least an hour. And then this recruiter will go back to the hiring manager and confirm a window for you. Once that window is confirmed, then you're all set to go for your technical interview. Stay tuned for the next tip. Hey guys, welcome back. And now we are going to talk about the favorite question of every hiring manager, and that is, tell me about yourself. Now they might gonna ask you in a different way, or maybe they'll ask you straight, tell me about yourself, or they'll say, tell me your experiences in the past, or walk me through what you have done. Anything they ask you related to that, basically they ask you the same thing, is go through everything that you have done previously and how can you fit for this role. Now, a lot of people do get scared with this question. Now, my advice to you is do not get scared. You should be proud of this moment. This is your moment to shine. This is your moment to put a big smile on your face and says, hey, this is my moment and now I'm going to tell you everything that I have done. So hold your shoulders up high and look him in the eye and start telling him or her what you have done and everything about yourself. Now think of this as if you walk into a car showroom and a person or salesman will try to sell you a car. What that salesman is trying to do, they're going to tell you every little feature of that car. That many horsepower, this car has a leather seat, rear view cameras, and all those features that car has to offer. Why? Because they want you to buy that car. So similarly, you have to do the same thing. You have to sell yourself. And when the time comes up for you to sell yourself, this is your proud moment. So again, embrace this question and sit back and then answer these questions with confidence. Now, how do you have to start? The first thing you have to do is summarize everything that you have done, which is like what your title and how many years you have spent. So always says, I'm a Linux system administrator, or I'm a Linux system engineer, or I'm an IT help desk technician, or whatever your title is for all these years. Or you could just say that I have been working in the Linux or in IT field for almost 5 or 10 years. That's how you start. Then you start talking about your current job, where you're working right now. If you do not have a job, talk about what you are doing. If you're taking a course, if you're taking a workshop, anything, start right at this moment as to what you are doing. Now, when you're starting from this existing job, let's say you're working for company ABC. Then the first thing you have to do is tell them what ABC actually, what is their primary business function, where they are, how many employees they have. So this way it gives them a really quick background of what this company is about. You don't have to go into detail. Then you have to tell them exactly what you do. So go through your resume beforehand. You don't have to look at your resume at that time. But if you are doing a phone interview, then it's a lot easier that you could look at your resume and you could go through, oh yes, I have done this and that, right? But if you're in front of the person, you don't have to actually go through the resume. You should have all those bullet points right here in your head. So you could say, I provide Linux support, and I have supported Linux that runs on maybe CentOS, Red Hat, SUSE, and the version that you have supported. Then you have to tell them how many servers that you have supported, whether it's physical servers or virtual servers. That's the very first thing, as for a Linux system guy, you have to tell them. Then you have to tell them what are the other technologies that you're supporting. For example, you're supporting DNS, you're supporting NFS, SendMail, Samba, anything that you are working on. Also, if you're providing any off-hour support, any rotational support, if you're doing any kind of documentation for them, tell them about it. Also tell them that all the support that you have providing for the virtual machines, if you will have some experience with other technologies like your storage or virtualization technology, or if you have actually brought in any new technology. So actually go through all the bullet points and summarizes them. You don't have to go through one by one, but summarizes exactly what you do for them. And remember one thing, every time you're going through one job, you have to add 1 or 2 accomplishment in that. So if you are working for ABC, perfect, beautiful. But what have you done? Are you proud of what you did there? So tell them, yes, I am. One of the good things, or the greatest project that I worked on with company, is that I have upgraded all the entire system, maybe 2,000 machines that were running on the older version of an operating system. You tell them that you were part of it. If you have introduced a new technology and it was not there before, you were part of it. Add that. Be proud of what you have done there. So go ahead and find out. I have spent 3-4 years. I'm sure you have done something good. So bring that up. Maybe there was a disaster. Maybe there was a complete system shutdown, and you were there who brought the system back online. So add that in there. Then you go back in the history. Go back to the previous job and tell them what you did for that previous job, what company was that for, and how many years you worked for that job. Again, go through really quickly about what you did for that company. If you have multiple jobs, 3, 4s, then you have to go very fast in your background, because you don't want to bore your hiring manager. They really don't want to know everything that you have done, but they really wanted to know everything you have done in like few minutes. So again, don't go over 5 minutes when they're asking you about yourself. Look him in the eye and make sure he's not getting bored. As soon as you see him moving around like this or yawning, don't. Then it means you have to cut it short and bring him back and have your attention. If he's yawning, then he's not going to buy you. So again, you're there to sell. You're there to sell your skills, what you offer. All right, what else? So now also I wanted to talk to you about a few things about your accomplishment. Tell them how you have migrated some systems, any new technologies that you have offered, any processes that you have implemented that changed everything significantly. Also awards that you have received. Maybe you've been Employee of the Month. Mention that. Or maybe you were nominated for something, but you were not selected. That's perfectly fine. Even getting a nomination is a huge thing. Do mention that. Then another thing I want to tell you, also add some quantifiable facts. Something that talks about numbers. What are those numbers? So let's say if you have never worked for any company and you're fresh, entry level, and you wanted to quantify something, and you say, hey Imran, I don't have any numbers to tell the hiring manager. Well, matter of fact, you do. Everybody does. So let's say if you have taken a course and that course you have spent 5 hours every day, that's a number. If you have taken a course, let's say, and that takes 2 hours of commute each way, that's a number. That shows your dedication that you have commuted 4 hours both ways to be where you wanted to be, to improve, to invest in yourself. Those are the numbers. If you are new, what are the things that you have done in college? Maybe you have worked with some extracurricular activities. Put that numbers in. What are the other numbers that you could say? Well, you have maybe written a script that was not there, that maybe bash shell scripting that you have written that improved the process. How it has improved, how many numbers, how many hours it has cut down, include that. Then, so servers, as I mentioned before, any servers that you have supported, any number of customers that you have supported, count it and mention that. Also, one thing I do mention, I do tell my students always, that you should at the end when you're wrapping up tell me about yourself part, also mention something a little quickly, maybe a few seconds about your personal life. So I know maybe the other person, the hiring manager, not interested as to what you do, but it's good that you add it really quickly. Don't go on and telling them everything about your personal life. Just quickly. In my spare time, I love to read books. In my spare time, I love to watch a show. For me, I'll say I love to watch a Seinfeld show because I'm a huge fan. I love to watch soccer, or I love to watch baseball. Anything that you do. This will maybe relate something to your hiring manager, and that hiring manager may ask you, oh yeah, I've seen that episode, that was the funniest one. Oh, I've seen that show, that was a really good one, they outperformed. So you see, you kind of having a personal level interaction with him, and that's the best thing. That's the best thing, because you're not just talking about straight professional, also a little bit of personal. All right, what else? One last thing that you have to say before you wrap up is, how do you fit for this role? Now, don't just finish up and saying, yeah, this is what I do. Always end up saying that I went through every job, all the job description, or every responsibility that you're looking for, and I noticed that you're looking for someone who wants to do the installation and configuration of CentOS server. You were looking for someone who could configure the DNS or do the DNS support. You're looking for someone who could install and configure NFS server. I noticed all that things in your job requirement, and I'll tell you that I have done all that, or I have done that specific ones. And that's why I think I am a perfect fit for this job. That's how you end up saying and wrap up everything about yourself. And again, as you are going, please make sure you have a great and beautiful smile on your face, so this person who is listening to you is actually have that same contagious smile from you. Have that confidence, and I'm sure everything will work out beautifully for you. Stay tuned. Welcome to the technical interview section. This section is full of technical questions. Some of the questions that we are going to cover are going to be related, like the tools that you use, why do you use them, what is the version of that tool, the application, the software that you use, what are the challenges that you had, if there is a problem with the system, how do you troubleshoot that, what is your approach if you have an issue and a system is down, how do you handle that type of situation, if you wanted to perform a system reboot, if you wanted to schedule a maintenance, what is your process of doing that? If you are in the middle of a situation and you got another troubleshooting issue going on the side, how do you handle it? Full of technical questions. So As I said before, the technical, more very depth in technical question will be handled on the second part. This part I'm going to cover how you could answer them directly by looking in the eye of the hiring manager. So let's go to the next lecture. Hey, hello once again and welcome to the situational or scenario-based question. Now what are those questions? Those questions are like they are not asking you to answer what is 2 plus 2 and it's easy you could say 4, but they are asking you how 2 and 2 makes a 4. So they'll throw a question at you. Walk me through the process how this works. Walk me through the process if things break, how would you troubleshoot? Walk me through the process if you picked up a phone and someone is yelling at you, the system is down, how would you handle it? These type of situational questions. Walk me through the process how you build the system. Walk me or tell me the process when you actually had to build the system from scratch. All these are situational based questions, or sometimes referred to as scenario based question. So I have covered a lot of these questions in this section. So let's go and take a look at them one at a time. Okay, another situational or scenario-based question could be, how do you handle a situation when your DBA team or application team, they come back to you and ask you for more memory or more disks quite frequently, maybe every week? Are you going to go and give them whatever they ask? How would you handle it? So we all know we are system administrators, we are system engineers, and we run the hardware and the operating system on top of it just for one reason. So we could actually support the applications that run on them, right? Applications are our application folks are our main tenants. Because of them, we run our infrastructure. So if you are running a database or application, there might be chance, or if you're lucky, might get very few requests to add the disk space. But quite frequently, you do get requests from database guys and application guys. Hey, can you please add the disk? Can you please add the memory? Now, memory or adding a disk is a resource request, and when you add that, that counts toward the cost. It costs to add more memory, right? So if you are in an environment where people really don't care how much memory you add, how much disk space you add, I tell you, you're good hands, great. But most of the time, people do keep track of how memory is allocated or how disk is allocated. You cannot just go and give disks like that. So this type of questions have been asked many times as well. So the way you need to handle this type of question is through finding out or be rational. When a user sends you an email or open up a ticket that they need this much disk space or this much additional memory, all you have to do is reply back and ask that what is the reason you need that. Provide any backup documentation from the vendor. Let's say if they're running Oracle database and that database requires more memory, ask them to provide some supporting documents that supports that application or that database does require this much memory. Or also look at some of the past performances of that machine. If it's a virtual machine, it's very easy that you could look it up. If it's in a VMware environment or any virtual platform, you can look it up at the graph that how that machine has actually used that memory or used that CPU or disk space. Many times people do see or find out that this machine has been given, let's say, 16 gig of memory, and in fact it's only been using 4 gig. But somehow there is a problem with the application itself, and the application owner would just come and say, hey, you know what, just add the memory, maybe it will fix the problem. This is not going to fix the problem. So you, as a resource person who has to assign the resource, would have to do some due diligence. You would have to check whether the resource that's been asked for are given because that is actually required and needed. So check the graph if it's a virtualization. Check to see if it's given 16 gigs and those 16 gigs are actually being utilized. If it's underutilized, talk to the person, talk to the database guy. Hey, look at this chart. And I noticed this chart, your machine has 16 gig and it's not using the 16 gig. Maybe there's something else. Maybe you look into the logs, find out maybe there's a memory leak in one of your application code. Try to work that with that database guy and application guy. And I'm telling you that if you do that this way, the person that you're dealing with would also appreciate that you are spending time to actually troubleshoot the issue. So you're actually finding out what the real problem is you're not just band-aiding it. So this is also, as I'm explaining it, that's the way you have to answer it as well. And I tell you, the interviewer will be very impressed that you are tackling the situation from the root. So once you identify the problem, great, the application guy will go back and add it or find out the root cause or involve the third party vendor. If they still come back, or if you still look, yes, the 16 gig or whatever the usage or resources that are assigned are actually been used to the full capacity. Now, you need to talk to them. Okay, you need plus 32 gig. Okay, do you have proper approval? Every company might have an approval. So if this guy, let's say John, is asking you to add more memory, you need to check with John's manager whether you have a proper approval. You have to check with your own manager whether you have a proper approval to add those resources. Once you add those resources, please do keep in mind when those resources were added to that machine. So this way, maybe a week or a month from now, if that person comes back to you and asks for more, find out why it was asked before and now what's the difference, what has changed, has anything added to that particular application. So try to keep track of everything you make changes. Most of the companies do have that change request for each VM that they add resources to. Most of the company keep track of those tickets where they'll add those everything in there. So that's how you have to answer these questions. If you have any questions, let me know. Alright, one of the situational questions that people would ask that is more of a situational and technical, but they want to see your approach is, let's say you have a Linux machine and its a disk space is full. How are you going to go and troubleshoot? Or walk me to the process of troubleshooting a disk space issue of a Linux machine. Alright, for that type of question, you have to be very careful how you answer, because you don't want it to say, I'll go in and start deleting the files. They don't want it to know that. Yes, of course, one of the ways is to delete files to free up the space, right? So the first thing you have to do is log into the machine and run df-h command, which will give you all the partition of the Linux machine, and you will see which partition is actually 100% full or close to 100% full. Once you identify the disk partition, then you have to run a du command to actually find out which file or directory is getting full or causing that disk space to get full. Let's say if you do find out in a partition that there is a file, let's say java.log file or application.log file, whatever log file or whatever someone has created, a dump file or core dump file, anything that is actually taking up the space, you need to identify that file. Alright, the file has been identified or directory has been identified. Let's say that file, the total disk space on your machine is 100 gig and the file itself is like 95 gig. You know the culprit. Perfect, you find that out. Now what's the next step? Are you really going to go ahead and delete it to free up your disk space? Hey, I need to save my server, so I'm going to delete it right away. No. Your answer should be, you have to investigate who owns that file or which process created that file or how that file got created. Most likely, the application that runs on your machine will actually spit out that file, or someone or user created that file, or it got created. You need to find out that user, you need to find out that application owner, and then you have to reach out to that person. Ask that person, hey, this application that you own created a file that is using up all the disk space, and I need to clean up the disk space to free up the resources of the Linux machine. Then that person would tell you, hey, can you transfer that file over to another machine, or FTP it over, or NFS it over, or save it somehow on your desktop and I'll collect it later on. then you take those precautionary measures that what you've been instructed to, or you could even tell that person to go ahead and please pull your file over. Once that has been discussed, then only then you could go in and delete that file to free up the disk resources. Alright, so summarize what I said. First, check what disk partition is causing the disk space, and that to do that you run the command df. Second, you run du command to find out which partition under, or which file or directory under that partition is causing that file system, and then reach out to the person, converse with the person, and then eventually delete it. All right, that's how you will answer and you tackle the situational type of questions. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay, moving on to the next situational question. Walk me through the process of troubleshooting an issue with Apache server. Or you get a call from a user saying, I cannot reach this website, or I'm getting some error message when I try to connect to this website. Or walk me through the process that you get a call from a user saying they're trying to open up this website which runs internally, but they cannot get to it. So there's many different ways that the interviewer will present this question to you. So basically what they're asking you is, the HTTP server, or the Apache server, or the web server is down. How are you going to troubleshoot that issue? Alright, so to answer this question is, first of all, you will try to access that page, or www.mydomain.com. You'll try to access it from your own machine. That's the very first thing you have to do. So the user is maybe in another office, another building, or having another issue. So very first thing you have to do, whether do you have that same issue or not, you open up your Firefox, go to www.mydomain.com, or whichever website that runs on your environment is down, try to access it. If you are able to access, you solve half of the problem. You go back to the user and ask that user, try to access another website. If the user cannot get another website, then means something wrong with that user's machine. You tell the user to reach out to help desk to resolve the issue. Maybe you have an IP problem or something. Your issue is solved. Now, if the user cannot or can reach other website, not just particular this website, and you try to connect, but you can. So now you think, oh, the user is having only the problem with this website. So maybe try to have the user reboot his or her machine, clear the cache or cookies or anything, and then have that user try again. Now that's the very first basic thing. Now let's suppose you have tried it and you are also not able to connect to that website. So you go into www.mydomain.com and it's down. Alright, it's a time for concern. You should also try to connect to another website within your domain to see if it's just that one particular website or all other ones. And let's say you come back, all of the websites are accessible except this. Now you are getting close that the issue is only particular to that one website or that runs on one specific server. Alright, perfect. Now next thing you have to do is you log into that machine or SSH into that Linux machine which is running that Apache or HTTP service and serving that page. You log in. First thing, you confirm by pinging it that the server is available. Second thing, you SSH into it, so which means the operating system is up and running and SSHD service is up. You logged in. Beautiful. By the way, if you're not able to log in, if you're not able to ping, the same thing starts back again. You have to come in through the console and do the troubleshooting. So now you have confirmed, you logged in. Now, once you logged in, the very first thing you have to check is whether that HTTPD service is running or not. Because that's the service is the one that actually have to serve those pages. Alright, let's say you checked, you run systemctl status on HTTPD or ps-ef grep for HTTP or whichever the web server or whichever the service is running on. And you do see the service is down. Alright, you troubleshoot the issue perfectly. The next step is to start the service back on. And you know how to start the service back on. Everything's back online. You tell the user all good. Now let's get more into one step further. Now let's say if you do verify the service is running, now what's the problem? Now most likely I tell you that most of the time what happened is always do uptime on your server. Why would I say uptime? Is because whenever your server or machine that running Apache reboots, a lot of things that were disabled get re-enabled. So check uptime, and most likely your machine probably have been rebooted recently, and that has kicked off some enablement of some of the services like firewall. Check uptime. If the uptime says few days or few hours, then most likely that's a problem. But still, if it's been running for a while, check to see your firewall. If you're running the latest version, you probably have firewall D. If you're running the older version, you're probably going to see IP tables. I tell you that 9 out of 10 times people have this problem when they cannot connect to a website is because the firewall running on the server somehow get enabled. And most of the companies do have that disabled as long as they're running in a very private, secure environment. Just make sure before you disable that firewall, consult with your security team or your manager, or make sure with your team members that the firewall should be disabled on this machine. Then go ahead and disable it. That's completely one scenario. Now also what happened is if you're trying to connect to that website, let's say www.mydomain.com, and you cannot connect, also another one of the point is try to see if you could connect with the IP address. Maybe DNS is broken. If you are able to connect with the IP address right away, you know that's a DNS issue. Then go to the DNS server and check to see if that record for that www.mydomain.com to the IP address exists. Or if that machine or your own machine can connect to the DNS. Or even DNS isn't available or not. Maybe the whole DNS server is down. But by the way, if the whole DNS server is down, then the other website that you tried to connect or ping, that would have been down too. So there are many different ways to connect, but most of the time people, that they ask you this type of question, but you still cannot connect, the way they're trying to get you or to answer you is that little one piece is firewall. A lot of people do forget that they are pulling their hair trying to troubleshoot, they can't. And why? Because that firewall is enabled. Just by disabling it or enable that port 80 or 443 through that firewall would resolve that issue. Also, if the Apache server went down for some reason, please do check the logs as well to find out why it went down and then troubleshoot afterwards. Or if the whole server crashed for some reason, find out why it crashed. Look for the var log messages, check why it went down. If you have to open up a support case with your vendor, the OS support vendor, do that. A lot of things you could do, but in summary, as I said, this is how you have to approach this question. Don't go into a lot of details, don't bore or don't beat the bush. Just answer to the exact same steps as I answered. If you have any questions, let me know. Another situational question or more of a technical question is that most frequently asked, and I'm sure you as a Linux administrator or an engineer probably have worked on that type of issue many times, and people wanted to know this. You get a call or somehow you know that your system is running slow. How are you going to go about troubleshooting it? Or someone would ask, walk me through the process of troubleshooting a system that is running slow. So of course this system they're talking about is Linux. So there are many steps or many different ways to answer this question because it depends how you troubleshoot on actual life. So I would start asking you this question by a very basic thing. Let's say if you're new to this. You have a laptop that you use, a personal laptop. And let's say that laptop is running slow. Somehow you're trying to open up a browser, you're trying to open up a file, you're trying to run some program, and somehow it's just slow. How do you troubleshoot that? Right from the basic thing. So many times people, what they do is they try to see which process is taking. They open up a task manager if you're running Windows machine, and they see the process that's taking up. They try to control delete. They try to reboot the machine. Some basic things, right? Similarly, in Linux machine, when you try to troubleshoot, some of the basic things might not work, and that is one of them is reboot. You don't want it to go in and reboot the machine because your system is running slow. It's a production machine. You don't want to go in and reboot it, right? So they want to know the way you would handle situation like that, or you would troubleshoot situation like that. All right. For that type of questions, the very first thing you have to do is first you need to find out, or first you need to ping that machine and try to see you're getting the response, or the packet for every ping is coming back with the required packet time in seconds. If there is a delay, then it's most likely some kind of network delay that you're not getting a ping response. So there are many things that is involved that could cause a system response or system slow. One of the things is network. Another thing is storage. Another thing is resource itself, which is the operating system itself. Another thing is hardware. So there's so many components here, and you need to troubleshoot and find out every little component that is associated with your machine. So let's start again. So you log into the machine. Hopefully you do. So SSH is enabled. You log into the machine. And basic troubleshooting is, first and very foremost thing is you try to run the command, which should be one of the most favorite commands for every system administrator, is top. T-O-P. Top. You run the top command. The top command is kind of a lifesaver for every system administrator because it gives you the CPU information. It gives you how much CPU you have, how much is available, how much is in use. It gives you all the processes that are running and which process is using up the CPU. It gives you the memory information, how much memory you have, how much is available, and how much is in use. It gives you the information about the zombie process, give you the information what the process is in use and that is running right now. If a process, let's say, I'll give you the same example, a Java process. If you run top, you will see that process is running 100% or 95%. If you have multiple processes that causing your system to slow down, you're going to see it there. That's how the very first thing you have to do is run top. And that will give you your resource information. If you know that there's a process that's causing this problem, of course you have to find out who's the owner of the process, which I have already discussed. You have to reach out and then troubleshoot from there. If it's not a process issue, if not, it's not a memory issue, then you have to check the disk space. Maybe the disk is full, that is causing the system to slow down. Sometime when you run ls command, if your disk space is full, it's going to slow down and you're going to get the result back very late. Check if the disk space is full, and to do that, we talked about it, you have to run df command and then du command and free up the disk space. Let's say if your machine has memory issue, so you have a 16 gig of memory and all 16 gig is full, then now you have to think about how you could free up resources or add more resources. If you need to add more resources, of course you have to go through the virtualization, add it from there. If it's a physical machine, it's kind of hard, but it's possible that you have to open up the top of the physical machine, add a physical memory to it. So anyway, let's talk about the command. So first command you run is top. Second command that you should run, there's no sequence to any command, whatever that you run uptime. See if the system rebooted. You will check to see if the system is rebooted, and to find that out, you have to do uptime. Uptime not only gives you the uptime or the system reboot time, it also gives you the system load. The system load right now, 5 minutes from now, or 10 minutes from now, how the system load is going. Maybe the system load is fluctuating. Find out why is it fluctuating. Then you have to run IOStat. IOStat is more closely to your disk. So if you have IOStat issues or disk issues, if you have external disk and your machine is trying to write down to the external disk. How it's going to work. How it's going to write it down to the external disk. That's you're going to find out on IOStat. Run IOStat and you're going to see the latency in there. You're going to see all the information. If there is any latency, try to reach out to storage people, storage folks, to talk to them and tell them, hey, we're trying to write down, or my server is trying to write down to this disk, and I'm seeing this latency. Work it out. Try to see if there's a networking issue. How are you going to know? Network. Check ifconfig command or the newer command IP. Run that command. In there, you're going to find some collisions there. Maybe there are some issues. Maybe you're having an IP conflict somewhere that's causing a problem. Run netstat. Netstat command has so many different options that you could run, that you could check the established sessions or receive session. There's so many things you could do. Also run free command. Free command is more specifically for the memory. Similarly, you could cat the etc proc file for CPU info, for memory information. Also, another and great tool, never forget to mention that you would check the logs. You would check the system log. And where are those logs located? They are located in var log. And once you go to the var log, the very first log that you should check is the messages file. 9 out of 10 times, I would say, if there's a problem with the machine, it will be logged into that log. So you're going to check the log. Also, you're going to check the hardware errors. Where are you going to check the hardware? Sometimes you do have monitoring tools running in your environment. If there are, let's say, for example, you're running Nagios or Sitescope or anything like that. Check to see if those monitoring tools have reported any issues with your system. If you're running some kind of log monitoring tools, let's say Splunk or anything like that, check the logs. See if you identified or has identified or picked up anything on the error or critical. Also, go into the ILO or iDrag and check to see if that console has reported any hardware related issues. So there's so many things that you could tell. But definitely do mention the tools that are available to you at the operating system level. And those tools are the commands. And the very first command, as I mentioned, is run top, uptime, IOStat, free, and there's demessage, DMID code to check the system information, what's attached to your system. And there's so many other commands I'm sure that you could check. Just right now popped in my VMstat. So do mention all of them. Do mention how you're going to go through one step to another and why you will go from one step to another. And as you go through, as you identify the problem, how you're going to troubleshoot. If you put that answer in maybe 2 minutes or maybe 2 and 3 minutes, and the way you explain by putting all those commands, that's exactly what the person is looking for. That you do know those commands and you do know that there are tools available to you to troubleshoot efficiently. Alright, good luck. Alright, another situational question. You have a server, you could ping that server by the IP address, but you cannot ping that server by the host name. What could be the problem? Now, this is a very technical question, and you have to answer in a very situational way as to how you could troubleshoot. The person who asked you that question wants to see your approach, the common sense you have behind troubleshooting this type of issues. So the very first thing you have to start thinking before you answer, that you can ping the server by IP address but not the host name. What it means that there definitely has to do something with the host name and IP lookup. Now, first thing you have to do is, when you're answering this question, is the first thing is the person who's able to ping by IP address, not by the host name, is first need to make sure that host name and IP address record is in its local file system, or if it's pinging from Linux machine, then that entry from hostname to IP has to exist in etc host file. Every time you ping a machine by hostname, the very first location your machine, your source machine, will go and look for is your etc host file. It will go in there and it'll say, hey, you're trying to ping ABC server. Let me see if that ABC server hostname to IP address resolution exists in your etc host file. If it is there, and then it should be able to ping it. If it's not there, then your next step is the DNS. Can your machine can reach the DNS, which is the one, the translator that will translate the hostname to IP address. So if you are pinging a machine that, let's call it a machine Superman, right? If you are pinging that machine from your own machine, and your own machine, let's call it your Linux machine, your Linux machine should be able to reach out to the DNS server. Then the DNS server should be able to translate that hostname to IP address. If that is translated, you'll get to that hostname. If you cannot get to that DNS server, that's your problem right there. That you could ping it by IP address, but you cannot ping by hostname because there is no translator in the middle that could translate that hostname to IP address. So to summarize it, you first have to check your own local etc password to make sure you have that record in there. If you do not have that record, local record in your own source machine, then check your source machine can actually get to the DNS server. The DNS server is the one that keeps track of hostname to IP address. Or maybe, let's say if you do have a connectivity to the DNS machine and you still cannot ping it by IP address, then most likely, or you still cannot ping by hostname, then most likely the hostname to IP record does not exist in DNS. Then you could do NS lookup to find out whether that address exists or not. That's how you need to answer this type of situational questions. Okay, let's talk about the NIC bonding. A lot of time the hiring manager or the technical people that you're going to have the interview with will ask you these technical questions. Is NIC bonding, why do we need NIC bonding? What's the purpose of the NIC bonding? Or walk me through the process of how the NIC bonding works. Or how do you configure the NIC bonding? A lot of questions sometimes have the same answer, but they ask it in a different way. Phrasing is different. So anyway, every time you've been asked is why do we need a NIC bonding? That's one question. Second, how do you configure the NIC bonding? That's a separate question. So let's take both of these questions one at a time. First is, why do you need a NIC bonding? So I'm sure everybody knows what a NIC is. If not, a NIC or a port is actually the port, the network port on your computer. Also stands for network information card. That network interface card, not information, NIC, network interface card. That is a little port, depends on the speed, either 1 gig, 10 gig, or whatever the speed is. You have that one port connected with the Ethernet cable. So that Ethernet cable connected to the server is providing you internet service or network service to communicate from one server to another. Right? That's what we use. For your laptop nowadays, you use Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi adapter is actually also have built-in Wi-Fi technology, which we'll cover later. But let's talk about the NIC. Now, your computer is running in a production environment. What happens if that particular NIC, that port, goes down or becomes defective? Your computer is down, your communication, your workflow, the application that you're running from one server to another, they are down. So, how do you fix it? Well, first of all, you have to bring the server down, take the card out, and insert the new card in. How much is the downtime? Depends where the data center is, who is working on it, how effective that a person is, or how much knowledge that person has. So, are you really going to afford that much of downtime? No, right? So that's what the NIC bonding comes in. And you have one card, one port on it, and then you have another card, another port on it. You actually combine them or bond them together. That's the right word in Linux or in IT, is bond them together. Or sometimes what people do is they have two NICs on the same card and they combine them together, which in my opinion is not the right way. You gotta have the bonding on two different network cards. So anyway, you bond them together. Now it also serves two purposes, by the way. One is it gives you redundancy, meaning if your one NIC goes down, you have another NIC that is still functioning. That's one benefit. Second benefit, if you have, let's suppose, 1 gig of NIC and you add another 1 gig of NIC and you bond them together, you could aggregate them, meaning you could have a throughput of 2 gig instead of 1 gig. So you could have an extra bandwidth or a redundancy as well. So that's how you need to answer the question, why do you need NIC bonding? Is to save or protect your production environment in case a disaster or a system crashes. Second is, how do you configure it? Configuration of the NIC is very simple and straightforward. You don't have to go into each and every detail. The way you have to answer is, first you have to make sure on your computer the NIC driver exists. The driver that allows you to do the bonding, that driver exists. If not, install that driver using the command modprob. You install it, the driver is installed. The next thing is you gotta have two NICs, of course, right? If you're in a virtual environment, add the next second NIC. If you're in a physical environment, you gotta make sure you have a physical NIC, right? Let's say ETH0 and ETH1. You have to combine those together. In order to combine them, you gotta have them together. So now you have to create a file in etc sysconfig network scripts file, and then you have to create two different files. NIC bond1, for first master file, and then you have to create a slave file. You could create bond 0 if it's the first time you're creating it, and then you create ETH1 and ETH2 as a slave files. The configuration inside, the parameters is inside, you could get it anywhere or even online. You don't have to remember everything, what goes in. And believe me, the person who's asking you this question is not looking for you to answer every single detail of configuration. They just wanted to know whether you know how this configuration works. You set up a file, you create the NICs, you put the parameters, you restart the network service, and that's where you're going to have your NIC bond together. If there are any issues with it and you're not getting your network throughput, then you could always go to warlog messages to find out where the issue is. But you'll find out. And of course, to restart the network services with the command you will run, for older version you run service network restart or service restart network, but the newer version you will run system CTL command. So it depends which version you're running. So that's why you perform the NIC bonding. Okay, let's get into the DNS. So the question might be, tell me what DNS is, or how does the DNS work? Or explain me the process of installation and configuration of DNS. Or what are the different DNS records that are in the zone file? So any question could come your way, so be prepared. So I have seen about 80 to 90% of the time people ask you a question about, tell me how DNS works. So this is a very basic question, and a lot of people get it wrong. Yes, a lot of people get it wrong because they're not able to explain it right. So let's see how we could explain it the right way. And it's a very simple way to explain. So every time someone asks you the question, tell me how DNS works, the simple and most simple way to answer is DNS resolves hostname to IP, IP to hostname, reverse, and hostname to hostname. That's simple. Nothing else. Again, DNS resolve hostname to IP, IP to hostname, and hostname to hostname. So, if you want to get into more detail, how DNS works is when you go to www.google.com, do you know that computers do not understand letters? They understand digits. So behind that .google.com, there is an IP address. That IP address is translated. So you put in google.com, that is translated to an IP, to digits. Who translates that? DNS does. So if you're sitting at home and you type and you open up your browser on your computer and you type in www.google.com, it's that simple. Comes up, the Google page comes up. But do you know what happens in the background? It actually goes to your router. And your router, the modem do you have at home, it asks that modem, hey, who's google.com? And if that router has that information locally available, it'll give you, hey, Google is this IP address, 172, blah, blah, blah. It is resolved, you see the page. Now let's say if your modem local to your house or your company or your business, your modem does not know that information. Then what it does, it actually goes outside to the main DNS servers. Do you know that there are about 12 or 13 DNS servers worldwide that are resolving and serving these requests for people? So every time you go on the internet, you're actually going to these DNS servers and asking, hey, I'm going to abc.com. Can you give me the IP address of this abc.com? And those DNS servers has that information. They have this kind of a bookkeeping or kind of record keeping where they keep that track of, okay, this is the host name, right? This is the IP. This is the IP. This is the host name. They keep that track. So, again, this is how, it's very simple. This is how the DNS works. If you go into your browser and type it as URL, it has to get resolved to an IP address, and the DNS is the main guy who is resolving or changing that hostname to IP. Now let's talk about how the installation works. It's very simple. As I explained earlier on our HTTP lecture, that first you have to make sure to find out what is the package name associated with DNS. And in Linux, it is bind. B-I-N-D, bind. So check whether the bind package is installed by running rpm-qa command and grep for bind package. If it is there, beautiful. If it's not there, then you run the yum command to install that bind and all the required dependent packages. Once that is installed, downloaded and installed, then you have to go into etc directory and in name.com file. Now the DNS has its own service called named, N-A-M-E-D, named, and its configuration file is named.com. So you go into the configuration file, you make the configuration, changes whatever the way you want to. And then you get into the zoning file. That's where you create the zones. Now the zone files is where you keep the records. Now you're probably thinking, hey Imran, didn't you just say there are already 13 DNS servers that keeping track of all the hostname and IP? Definitely. But let's say if you open up a company today, your company is XYZ, and you have 10 servers. You want to keep track of those 10 servers by hostname and IP address. So you have your own local DNS server in your own corporate world. So it could resolve it within its own environment. And that's where people ask you a question about the DNS. So you install you configure it, you create the zone files, and at the end you start the service. And how do you start the service? Systemctl service restart. Service is named, and that's how the service starts. And again, if the service is still not responding, make sure your firewall has that port 53 enabled for DNS. Now let's talk about the zone and its records. If someone trying to find an IP address of a host name to IP, then they would have to have a record in the DNS, and that record goes by record A, just simply A. So if you go into the zone file and you read that zone file, you're going to see every host name to IP resolution are created with the record in A, hostname in A IP. That's for the hostname to IP. What about IP to hostname? The reverse. That's another reverse lookup for zone file, and the record is tracked or kept with a record called PTR, stands for pointer, so reverse pointer. Now, if you want to resolve hostname to hostname, what is that record? That record is CNAME altogether, and that is also in the hostname to IP zone file. So people will ask you this question definitely. What is the port that DNS runs on? 53. Okay. What are the three hosts or the entries that DNS works on? Again, A record, PTR record, and CNAME record. Perfect. What is the configuration file for DNS? etcname.conf. Okay. What is the package name for DNS? Bind. How do you install it? I just explained you a few minutes ago. You installed using the yum command or put the package in. Now, that's the thought process behind the DNS. You really need to know how DNS works. Because believe it or not, 50% of the time, the issues that we deal with troubleshooting server, when someone says, hey, I cannot connect to this server, 50% of the time is because their DNS is not working. They're trying to go to ABC server, but the DNS is not responding. It's saying that, hey, I don't know who the hell ABC is. So if you really know the DNS is working or not, right away, 50% of the time, you resolve that issue right away before wasting any time. So if you answer these questions about DNS this way, I'm sure you're not going to have any problem. And the hiring manager and the technical resource will know right away, this guy really knows what he's talking about. Okay, tell us about the Etsy password. So you work with Etsy password, you know what goes inside of it, right? Every time you create a user, the user information is saved in Etsy password file. And its group information is saved in where? Etsy group file. And its password information is saved where? Etsy shadow. So you might get a question where the interviewer or technical interviewer guy will ask you, tell me what's inside of Etsy password. So if you already know, great. If not, once again, you don't have to know exactly how the sequence or order of each field is. If you confuse or mix one or the other, again, that is perfectly okay. You don't have to worry about it. So you could start by saying that first field is always the username. Second field, if you notice, it has a little X. What it means that it has a password, but that password is not there. The password is in Etsy shadow, which is in encrypted form. What happens next? Next one is the user ID. The user ID that is assigned to that user. Then the fourth field is for the group ID, which group that user belongs to, and that group IDs, that is the fourth column. Then the user description. So let's say my user is IFZol, but what really that user is. So my full name might be that field, which is the description field, Imran Afzal. Then after that, we have a field for home directory. So if a user that you created has its own home directory, that's where it specifies the home directory, usually /home/ifzol. And the last column is the shell. The shell that user will be using, which is /bin/bash in most of the Linux cases, or if other operating system, it might be bin ksh, csh, or it depends which shell the user is using. And all the encryption goes where? In Etsy shadow file. So you might get a question as well. So do you think by reading Etsy shadow file you could find out a user's password? The answer is no, because it has a long password, a long string of characters, but that's not really a password. It's an encrypted password which you have provided. Also, if you wanted to change the password of a user, which command would you use? You would use password file. Just password command, PASSWD. If you want to change the password duration or anything that has to do with password itself, then you could use CHAGE, change age, or when the password expires. There are many other commands that are related to it. When you do man on PASSWD, you're going to find other commands as well. So I do recommend that you go in there and check out all the other commands. So anyway, anything that is related to user creations, you need to know and understand how Etsy password, how Etsy group, and how Etsy shadow works. And also all the related commands that are used to actually manage those user accounts. All right, see you in the next lecture.
If you want to learn more about Linux, check out my best-selling course on Linux at udemy.com, or you could go straight to my website utclsolutions.com and you will find the exact same course there.